Thank you for applauding before I even speak. That's so sweet of you. You know, the rabbi who delivers the sermon in this congregation is always taking credit for the weather. This is my first real reunion. Growing up in Miami, Florida, and attending Coral Gables High School, I felt little connection after graduation. I felt little connection after leaving the University of Florida. I never felt the need to return to a school or to a fraternity reunion. How in the world would I explain my undergraduate behavior given my title? Now, thanks to my Jacksonville family, I did sit in the swamp for football games on Thanksgiving weekend. I cheered for a team, the Gators, that won 3 national titles. However, when playing against Michigan, I did support Michigan. 3 daughters happy. I briefly attended one reunion. It was Susan's 25th at Syme High School. I lasted about 15 minutes as she happily merged into a group of friends that she had not seen for years. I want you to know that I have envied my friends who are regulars at the Central, Mumford, and other high school reunions. At last, my time has arrived. Our reunion on this Shabbat is a coming together of classmates, childhood friends, members of a youth group whose name has been changed to protect the innocent, or should I say the guilty. It is a reunion of stories, journeys, lives lived both together and separately. I was a very young rabbi when I arrived in 1971 at Temple Israel. I was convinced by Bernard Linden and Bernice Linden, he was my president, to turn down San Diego. And I'm so happy that they convinced me to do that. Now, some of you were in college when I began my temple journey. Tonight, I will share a few stories. You may not have been here, but I am sure there are similar moments you will recall during our weekend together. When I joined this congregation, I know all of my colleagues would say exactly the same thing. I had the best job in the rabbinate. Youth rabbi at a vibrant congregation that was part of a larger world. Misty, the Michigan State Temple Youth. Nifty, the National Federation of Temple Youth. I had such an honor to work with so many women who were volunteers appointed through the sisterhood who are our youth advisors. I'd like to point to Harriet Friedman, one example. Thank you for being here. Are there any other youth advisors of my day still here? Harriet, thank you for representing all of them. You worked so hard. They were there. They made me look good. It was so great. Coming to Temple, I had a camping background. Camp Blue Star in North Carolina. A camper as a child. In rabbinical school, I was one of the camp directors. Youth group, I believe, is at its best when it's based upon a camping model. Retreats, where we prayed, where we studied, and played tackle football after the regular game of flag football. No matter how much they tried to hurt me, I never gave you the satisfaction of seeing my pain. How many of you remember Robert Lask of blessed memory? He was a most remarkable and impactful teacher. At my first Temple Israel retreat, he began instructing those present on how to build Molotov cocktails. If you knew Robert Lask, he wanted kids to understand the reality of Jewish history, not the Jewish history that we would like to pause and not consider challenges. I did have to reduce the angst that was caused by this message. And what was remarkable, not one parent called me after the event. He was a great teacher. In youth group, there were sleepovers, mystery trips, and so much more. And I always tried to figure out who are couples. They traveled in herds, in groups, and you never really knew who was holding whose hand. I am grateful to those I met later in life, frequently before a wedding, who filled me in on all of the things I never knew happened during those years. Youth group at that time, and still, was part of our Temple Israel High School program, where we learned and became involved with Israel, with social action, Black-Jewish relations. It was the time of the Vietnam War. We taught courses in death and dying and so much more. One year I was asked by students about Jews for Jesus. I invited the head of the group to come to Temple one Sunday morning. This was at the time when it was still Sunday school, not yet Monday night school. He had the title, he had given it to himself, of rabbi. A proudest moment was when our teens, with brilliant and pointed questions, left him with the feeling that he was not going to do this again. I was prepared with 12 of my own questions. Not one did I have to ask. I lived during the time in Temple Israel, and many of you will remember. When we transitioned to kippot, the discussion, should the clergy be allowed to wear kippot? Should we give out kippot? Should we have them well? And of course, today it's part of the regular world we live in. The question was asked during my time at Temple Israel, was it okay for a little girl to receive a talit at her bat mitzvah? We always presented them to boys, and of course we went along and we were happy. During these years, the first AA group came to our congregation, Temple Israel, and that was motivated by members of our congregation who had come to us. I was often asked, how did things work at Temple during those early years? What was it like for a young rabbi? As still is the case, we had a weekly staff meeting Tuesday morning, and the clergy and the leadership were a team. Every time this young rabbi had an idea, the response was, go and do it. I was naive. I continued to raise my hand. I was blessed with two older rabbinic colleagues, Rabbis Fram and Syme, who were mentors, each in their own special way. I recall everyone agreeing after my suggestion that we should begin the first Michigan youth group trip to Israel, coming from Temple Israel. 18 kids, a Meshuggah rabbi who had no national or other support, departed on a 7-week trip that had been created online with an Israeli travel agent that he had never met. Looking back, knowing what happens today and the support that people have, I am amazed at my own chutzpah and the willingness of parents to allow their teens to join. 7 weeks with airfare. Take a guess. $999. The happiest moment was when I received a call from Sarah Pitt of blessed memory, a remarkable woman who said to me, Rabbi, you know, when my kids were growing up, they wouldn't have been able to afford to go on this trip. Times had changed for her family with her business and Murray's Auto. Sarah and Irving made it possible for no child to be excluded due to an inability to pay, a magnificent tradition that continues today. Ours was no longer, and this was only after 1 or 2 years, probably the first, was no longer a mission for the affluent alone, and I was thrilled for the kids. An even happier moment in my career was when I asked Susan to marry me, and she said yes, and we celebrated 50 years in July. Then I asked her, Susan, would you like to go to Israel on our honeymoon? Can you imagine? She was absolutely thrilled. Then I told her that she would be traveling with 40 teenagers. This is all true. Her quick response, that will be even better. And this never changed. On one trip, I will never forget a stop in Amsterdam on our way to Israel. 80 teens, and I see them here with Dr. Faber and wife Sandy and their children joining Shoshi and Svika, our Hebrew names. Why, oh God, I'll look into the sky, did they put us in the Krasnopolsky Hotel, located on the outskirts of the red light district, where they also sold marijuana? In our hotel, oh God, why did we have beer and not Coca-Cola? We survived, and the youth group thrived. I sometimes share my sermons with my daughter who's out of town, Jennifer. A few days ago, she reminded me, she was younger than the kids on the trip, that one of the participants asked her to tell me that he had flushed it. It is now legal at a certain age. Youth group was a way of life at Temple and opportunities for teens who attended different high schools to interact. We were living in a different world. Now, some of you may have seen the photograph of me with my toddler daughter, Jennifer, on my lap that was part of the overall website created for this event. How many of you read the text written by a teen for our little community? Rabbi Loss seduces a younger woman to prove the age-old saying that incest is relative. Jennifer just loves to run her fingers through her daddy's beard. Those words could get you fired or imprisoned today. Okay, perhaps an exaggeration, but you get the point. Back to our reunion. We return here to remember the past, but also to speak clearly about the future. Judaism, our faith, is rooted in memory. Zachor, remember, often focusing on tragic moments in our history. This weekend, through stories told and friendships renewed, we will recall that we fiercely believed that we could change the world. We were going to have a better world for our children and for our grandchildren. That's what we stood for. That's what we cared about. That was what we were working for. We marched and we worked to see that happen. We prayed that there would be a time when Israel would be at peace. We lived through wars. I was there at one time with a group of kids when planes were flying over our heads. And I told the kids they're just practicing. I knew that they were on their way to Lebanon. We were not naive, but we tried to believe that times were a-changing. Times were a-changing. We worked to see Israel at peace. And then once again, as was mentioned, October 7th, I have had the privilege of being in Israel 3 times since that date. So very painful. But what's amazing is that we have a trip planned in November for seniors. Yedwab's the young and I'm the old, or older as possible. And if you are still interested, we'll make room for you. We discuss the disease of anti-Semitism in all of our classes. Who could have imagined in that different time that we would see at universities and in streets the signs and voices calling death to Jews and death to all Zionists? A reunion at Temple Israel is not only a time to look back, but is an opportunity to consider what have we learned. Did we at Temple Israel do enough to educate you and prepare you for college? Should we have worked harder to stop you from skipping out to Biff's, the hamburger joint in Palmer Park? Did we prepare your generation with tools to pass on our tradition to your children and for some of your grandchildren? Will your next generation be willing to fly across the country to come home to a temple they left many years ago? Those who are here this Shabbat were and are a remarkable group. By sheer force of will leadership, and I point him out, Dr. Lenny Hutton, he's been mentioned, and he was my first youth group president. And if you've watched him create this moment, you know the kind of president I had, and I thought everyone's going to be the same. Do this, Rabbi Loss. Get this done, Rabbi Loss. We're not going to fail. Anything and everything can be accomplished if we work together. This weekend happened because of the effort of him and those he joined. It is time to renew, I believe, our dedication to passing on all of the lessons we have learned, gifts given from the generations before us, and opportunities with which we were blessed. These opportunities was provided by our teachers, by our rabbis, by our congregants, and I would suggest even of greater significance, the remarkable leaders who took the opportunity to move us forward during these years. So I have one announcement. Having reached the age of 80, for my sake and others, wear your name tags at all times. Lightning will strike anyone who asks anyone else, "Do you remember me?" Thank you to all who made this happen. Welcome home. Shabbat Shalom.